least of the working class in the world, both in terms of formal employment and informal employment. And that more and more women are being pulled into the formal labour market as well, but often into very bad conditions. And particularly women with children end up with wages way below those of men and of women who do not have children. So the issues of the maternity gap, the issues of conditions at work, the issues of safety at work, safety from sexual harassment at work, all come out as huge issues. So can I ask Jabu first, and then Vera, and then Pat Horn to speak to us for a few minutes about their experience at work? Someone's trying to speak.
Hello?
Hello?
I think there's some echo here. Good evening, all. I am Jabunala. You saw me last week. I'm back again. I'm talking from Oxford. My involvement with the precarious work is mostly to do with the Oxford Living Wage campaign, which I am chair of in Oxford. As I explained before, Oxford is a tale of two cities, because we have the working class, and then we have the people that have. So it's the haves and the have not. So the issue around the precarious work is that it is the illusion that it creates as if it's an inflexible working environment. But what it does the opposite. So my experience with agency workers, I feel they should be referred to as disposable workers because of the way that the workers are treated in these employment circles. Most of all, been organizing around with the students in the university who are very much on the ball with the precarious workers, whereby the Oxford University has recently agreed to pay the Oxford Living Wage, which is £10.21, but found that once it's paid the Oxford Living Wage, it's been really tough to get them to pay the workers that they employ as precarious workers in terms of paying them the living wage. But what they have done, they've agreed lately to pay the living wage, but they've then gone and clawed it back from the workers who are working at weekends, who are mostly women workers. Working at weekends, the shifts at the weekends tend to carry a different rate in terms of the hourly rate, but what they've done, they've brought down that rate, and they're now clawing back what they said they will pay. So it's very much a cat and mouse game. But more than anything, the experiences that are coming across from a lot of women and a lot of people that are working for the agencies around Oxford or around Oxfordshire is that the precarious nature of their working environments and conditions are pretty much very much loose and not taken care of. There is no filtering gap in terms of sick pay and holiday pay. People know that when they are working for these types of hours, they can get called at any time, and if they start to refuse these hours in terms of saying I can't make it for the shift that you've asked me for, it means a lot of shifts being cut back. But if they do carry on doing this shift, there is no security in terms of being looked after if there were accidents at work. Women in the front line, especially those that have been working as COVID. I actually went with Rukasa as well as an agency worker, where those workers were called COVID workers, and they were doing almost 12-hour shifts. This one was mostly brought around COVID because of the situation of COVID. So a lot of the homeless people that were around Oxford were put in different different hotels, such as Travel Lodge, such as lots of university empty buildings. But the situation is once these workers are brought in, they are not on the same similar stratification as workers that are contracted to work. But for those that are working, what I found with the Travel Lodge workers who are employed by Travel Lodge, they were brought in, they are now working for reduced wages, and at the same time they've increased their workload, where workers are working as not just reception workers, but they are cleaning, they are also doing bar work, they are also cleaning the hotel rooms, all for the same rate. So the rate of exploitation has just increased, and this is not just for those workers. This is prevalent to shop workers, is prevalent to care workers. All of this really inflexible type of demands on these workers, and yet there's an illusion that is created that these workers are working as somehow flexible workers. They can choose when to work, they can come in when they like. But the reality of it, they are the most exploited because they don't get allowances for sick pay. They don't get any allowances for holiday pay. But it's not only that, there isn't much research in terms of data collection as far as these workers who are working in these conditions. So it's been quite an interesting time in terms of it's because they are dismissed as unskilled workers, but this economy now is not just prevalent towards those types of workers. It is now affecting even workers who are working as lecturers, who are working in university. Anybody that is deemed under these insecure types of contract is in danger of being in that unstable employment, and also there are a lot of redundancies being made, especially with shops where they've had long-term workers in contracts. They are giving them redundancies and then bringing in new staff to work on the former contracts for real low wages. So there's a real fight on in terms of what is going on with insecure work. I've recently moved a motion through the Oxford Living Wage campaign to the Oxford City Council. The Oxford City Council endorses the Oxford Living Wage campaign. They support I mean, it goes up mostly around November. So they support us in terms of saying, yes, we will pay it, and they pay their employees the living wage. But at the same time, there's still that sort of gap in terms of understanding, especially the insecure workplaces, whereby the council themselves, within their contract, they are subcontracting such workers as third-party workers, which is quite quite. It's almost what I'll say a contradiction in terms of understanding the struggles that the workers are facing, and the relationship also with, say, Oxford University and the City Council. They try to kind of very much keep a really good working relationship with each other at the expense, I feel, of the workers that are exploited, because a lot of the things, as much as we are working with the council and they endorse the Oxford Living Wage, we do tend to not get told what has been decided. Like, for instance, there's quite a lot of talks between the Oxford University and the Oxford City Council, where we come and find out that certain decisions have been made, and we we haven't been told about those sort of decisions. So it's quite a lot of issues here in Oxford regarding the instability around workplaces. But more than anything, it's worrying. A lot of it is worrying because a lot of the insecure work is mostly delivered by immigrants. It's mostly affecting people from different countries. And I feel this is deliberately done by a lot of agencies to recruit from this pool, because they understand that a lot of people suffer from not understanding English. So it is easy to cheat them of wages and cheat them from understanding their rights, because I myself experience whereby they will take something from your payslip and you try to get them to give a clear understanding as to why something was taken. For instance, some jobs which are what you call set through agencies, they don't even last even a month, but yet they will charge workers training programs of up to 50 quid, and they deduct it when they really didn't do any training. They just sort of give people an online course and say, go and do that online course, and that's what they call training. And really it is quite a tragedy in terms of the experiences that you see, because a lot of workers are in this sort of situation where they are feeling entrapped. They are trapped in the situation. They don't have any choices, and they are finding it really hard to organize themselves, because the nature of the precarious work is that the people that you work with, you hardly know them. You see them, you don't see them. You see them, you don't see them. So it becomes, it's not so much, it's not a very good place to organize for unions in terms of collective resistance that can take place. And whereby, like for instance, we've got the CWU, which is the union that deals with the postal workers, which is quite a good, strong union in terms of collective bargaining and action. But they are facing a lot of issues when it comes to representing workers in this sector, because the workers who do try and be strong and organize themselves around these, they are targeted by those people that the employers or the agencies, they are targeted, and they are not given hours after if they try to complain about certain conditions. And they are.
Can I ask you to finish in a
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will finish. There's just to say that the workers are not given sort of support from the employees, and they are targeted and they are sacked early and given early redundancies if they are seen to be agitating for union rights or for workers' rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Jabu. I could have taken a whole page of notes of things we have to do as follow-up from that. I think it was a really useful contribution. Is it possible to ask Vera to speak next with a little bit about what happened in this week, because I think that's too important to miss, and then a little bit, I've heard Zira speak about how she organises work before, and I am in awe of how it's done. But it's if you could speak, Zira, for a little bit about what's happened this week, and then a little bit about how the Home-Based Workers Federation works. Thank you.
Yes, but I think my internet is not working properly. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
But your voice is not coming. Okay, fine. The issue was that I think you know about the motorway incident happened in Lahore. That was happened on 9th September. So majority of the people, even trade union and the women activists, the political party was very active to raise this issue, because this is not the only one issue which happened in the road, that the women in front of their children was raped, and even robbed by the theft. And I think the police or someone was involved in that incident, and still the authority hasn't
I've lost sound from Zara. Has everybody else?
hello.
Ah, great, you've come back. Good.
So we have organized one demonstration uh, against the violence against the women, even transgender. So when we organized that demo on 14th of September, one channel, the name of that channel is Bold, and on that channel they put my picture in one program, and then they have called one so-called writer, and he said he used very abusive language, vulgar language for us and for other women. So someone told me that we have to complain on PAMRA. It's a Pakistan electronic medium where we can launch our complaint. So I have launched my complaint. I have filed the complaint, but there was no result, or I didn't get answer from those authorities. So that's why we have organized a demo uh, 2 days before in front of press club, and I think we will go for the
It slipped again, the sound. I know Zara's still there. Well, it says she's still here. Give it a minute to see, does it link up?
Felicity, I seem to recall there was a similar problem last week with Zahara's line. So if we're patient for just a minute, as you said, she may come back on.
Good, good. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, Pam's put on chat just now the details of the response to the rape in Lahore, and that's what Zara organised a demonstration against. And for organising that demonstration, she was then vilified in national press. Okay, Zara, are you back?
hello.
Great.
Sorry, I think my net.
I'm so sorry. I think this illustrates again the fact that we have to have more than a Zoom meeting as a connection. We've got to have, we've got to have other things. We can do a video and show a video of someone speaking, as well as relying entirely on the connection, which is bad enough anywhere. And if you've got people not wanting you to speak as well, it's twice as hard.
Hello.
Hi, Vera.
Sorry, I think my net is not working properly. So maybe should I write or email if again it's happened?
If you could, Vera, we are hoping that we can set up a website just for this kind of discussion of how women are organising. and we can be as discreet as we like on that, with either giving proper names or not proper names. So if you send things to me, I will put that up so everyone can see it. And then maybe when we're, we have a chance, we can get a video of you talking as well that we can share. So thank you very much for trying today. If you can hear me, can you still hear me a bit?
Hello.
Oh, hello. Hang on.
Yes, Felicity, what you are saying?
Could you
Sorry.
hear that I said, could you send me something in email and I will share it?
Yes, I will write it.
Or do you have WhatsApp on your phone? Could we get a better signal on WhatsApp?
Maybe, but it's overall the internet issue, I think. So it will not work even on the WhatsApp.
Okay, all right. I think we'll have to leave it at that for now. But thank you very much indeed, and we will continue the contact and try and see what we can each do to help each other. Thank you so much, Zira, and I will be in touch. Thank you. So our next speaker, I think, is Pat Horn. If Pat's here.
Yes, I am, Felicity.
Could you talk to us a little bit about organising at work and the difficulties facing women in doing that?
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk a bit about women in informal and precarious work, which is what I know more about. And I think it's sort of fairly well known that in the labor market generally in the world, the gender division of labor is such that the work that's done by women is often lower paid forms of work. And when women have come into the labor market, it's often at the lower end in work that is not only low paid, but also often very insecure. So we were just hearing from Jabu about this in the current situation in Oxford. Often when unskilled work is needed, then women get brought in. In many countries now, technically it's illegal to pay women less for the same work that men do, but there's many countries where women still do paid less. But even in countries like South Africa, for example, where I'm from, women get paid the same as men do for the same work, but they don't do the same work. And the kinds of work they do tends to get valued less, so they don't get equal pay for work of equal value. Because many women work in the informal economy, very often it's because of the fact that if I think of the example of the Self-Employed Women's Association in India, SEVA, the way in which that union started was when the town of Ahmedabad, which used to be sort of like the Manchester of India, it had a very thriving textile industry. When the textile industry collapsed, the workers in that industry had been men. It wasn't a woman-dominated textile industry, it was a male-dominated one. But when all those men lost their work, the people who then had to go out and earn a livelihood were basically the women. And in the global South, I think one of the reasons why we find a large number of women in many kinds of informal work, it's not the informal work is in different sectors. Some of the sectors are more male dominated, but a number of them are very female dominated, particularly street trading, home-based work, which is Zara's area. I listened to her last week. Domestic work, etc. And those kinds of work tend to be not covered by social protection, very often not covered by law. When women work in agriculture, they often work in seasonal work, which again, it has conditions of informality, even if they do technically work for an employer. So on the whole, the way that the gender division of labor works is such that women have less income, but they also have less security. Now, I'm not sure that it's more difficult for women to organize, because in fact, if you look at the story of how women have organized, women have tended to get together and organize, but there's certain kinds of work that are very isolated, and home-based work is one of those, and domestic work. And the difficulty that women have in those sectors is that they are not in a workplace where they're surrounded by their other colleagues, and therefore getting organized is difficult. But in sectors like street traders and sectors where people work together, women do organize. The only problem is that because society doesn't recognize those kinds of work, they're not regarded as workers, and they often when you organize people like street traders, for example, when we started to organize them in South Africa, we would go and talk to them about organizing for their rights, and they would say, "No, I'm not working. I'm just trying to feed my family." And so, they didn't even regard themselves what they did as work. So one of the key issues in organizing women in these kinds of work is basically the first step is to get women to identify as workers, so that and once they do identify as workers, organizing around the issues that affect them at work is a whole lot easier. But because generally, in patriarchal societies, women don't see women's work is not valued. The fact that they might be economically speaking the head of their household, even if technically speaking there's a man that runs the household. But in the case that I've mentioned, when the Self-Employed Women's Association in India started, it was basically because when the men in the household lost their work and there wasn't formal work for them, somebody had to go out and do it. And who was it? It was the woman. And I think that's one of the reasons why in many kinds of informal work you find a lot of women, because women have had to go out and hustle, basically. So they regard themselves as hustlers rather than as workers. But of course, what they're doing is work. And if you do a sort of a time study as to how they spend their day, these women who tell you they're not actually working, it starts at about 5 in the morning, and then it's, carries on till about 10 at night. And then they say it's even worse because then you have the third shift, when you go to sleep, and all you want to do is go to sleep. And then you've got somebody who's demanding that you do another shift. So, I mean, this is a sort of a humorous thing that a lot of the women in South Africa talk about. But basically, I think it's not an accident that organizations of workers in the informal economy have been led by women. So the fact that in India, SEWA arose as a pioneering organization, organizing women in the informal economy, isn't an accident. And the fact that since then, I mean, I had the good fortune to go and spend 2 weeks in India in 1993 with the organizers in SEWA and to see how they organized. And I found a lot of similarities with the way that I'd learned to organize in the emerging trade unions in South Africa in the 70s and 80s. And then, since then, organizations of home-based workers around the world have expanded, organizations of street traders, and the organization that I worked for until last year, StreetNet. I'm still an advisor there. And organizations like waste pickers organizations have emerged, and many of them are led by women. And that isn't an accident. It's basically because women workers do tend to get organized, even though they organize against great odds, where they're being exploited, undermined, not respected as workers. The dignity of the work they do is not respected. But there are increasing movements of organizations in the informal economy. So there's an international domestic workers federation. There's an international street vendors organization called StreetNet. There isn't an international home-based workers organization, but there are regional ones. There's HomeNet South Asia, HomeNet Southeast Asia. There's a move afoot to get these regional organizations together into a international organization sometime later this year. That's being organized by the organization called WeGo, Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, which is a technical organization which provides technical support to organizations in the informal economy. So basically, I could say a lot about that, but maybe I'll sort of leave it there. That it's worth following up on the organizations that do exist. There's now been, since the 90s when I started to do this kind of work, there has been an increased recognition of the organizations in the informal economy by the trade union movement. It was when SEVA first started in India, they met a lot of opposition from the Indian trade union movement. Eventually, they were recognized and allowed to register as a trade union in India, and eventually they were accepted as a member of the International Confederation of Free Trade Unions, and later I took the International Confederation of the International Trade Unions Confederation. And more and more, I think because of the fact that the formal trade union movement is losing membership as the world of work changes, some of the members of the trade union movement have understood that it's necessary to extend their organizing to cover more non-traditional sectors of work, meaning the informal economy, seasonal work, precarious work of various types, contract work, what they call a triangular employment relationship, disguised employment relationships, etc. All of the things which are much harder to organize than the traditional trade union movement. But there's been some, over the last 30 years, there's certainly been much more recognition by the trade union movement of the need to expand into work in the informal economy for its own survival, if nothing else, apart from the fact that that's what trade unions are supposed to do. So, and I think the key issue, and one of the reasons why it's been hard for workers in the informal economy with their organizations to be accepted, is because they have got much more women-dominated organizations, not exclusively, but many more. And the formal trade union movement is very patriarchal, as we all know. Some of us have sat in trade union congresses and struggled to get more recognition for sort of stronger women structures in the unions. And it's taken a very long time because you always sit in male-dominated meetings and try to get those kinds of decisions through. So this is why organizations like SEVA and like StreetNet, from the word go, set themselves up as women-dominated organizations and have been much more able to have women-led organizations, build up strong women leadership in those sectors of the working class. Of course, with informal work in the global north, Europe and North America, a lot of the informal economy are migrants. I can see that you're mouthing something at me, Felicity. You'd probably ask me to wrap up.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So finally, just to say that in the global north, what's further compounded the difficulties of organizing in the informal economy is the fact that a lot of the people in the informal economy in that part of the world are migrants, and then the issues of migrancy, which is another area of sort of oppression and vulnerability, then compounds the vulnerability of being in an informal sector of work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And yes, indeed, on the issue of the difficulties of migrant workers. Can I now bring Elena in on Belarus to talk about quite what's happened this week, to update us and to talk and to generalize it a bit. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Yeah, thanks very much. I will try to give a quick update. Well, yesterday was yet another Women's March, well attended, with about 150 people detained, as always. Today was everyone's march, which they called the March of 97%, and it was in the wind and driving rain, with lots of military vehicles to stop the protesters, with lots of people being picked off before the march, but they have a technique of arriving at the general places of gathering as in very, very small streams. So they just trickle in and pretend to just walk around. Even against that, the police employed the new tactic of just picking on individual people and searching their bags, checking if there is any flag, any slogan in there, and detaining them. Or trying to pull someone out of a crowd, pull someone out of a group or out of the human chain. So today, the latest information I've got is about 200 were detained. Unfortunately, none of the presenters that hoped to join us tonight were able to make it because they're still getting home from the march. They closed off the internet, the public transport was closed, so people are just making sure that all friends are there and safe and not detained, and trying to help those detained. And we also hoped to have Lisa Merliak, who was International Secretary of Belarus Independent Union, with us tonight, because she was detained. And then she had a hearing, and I just want to thank again all the international trade unions who very quickly rallied to defend Lisa, started sending messages of protest. I'm sure it helped in some way. Lisa got off with just a fine of equivalent of about 90 euros, and so many people kindly offered to pay that fine. And she said, no, don't, thank you, it's very kind. I'm not going to take that money first, I'm going to appeal, because obviously it's completely unjustified. And she's going to go ahead and do that. And she said that at the moment, financial donations straight to the trade union, not to the workers, could be almost a hindrance, because the authorities, of course, are accusing anyone who is doing anything of being completely puppeteered and controlled from the West and paid from the West. So it's a very tricky ground. But of course, people who are actual striking workers who live, one salary to the next and have lots of loans and responsibilities, it's very hard for them, and people are just running around to trying to help them in a targeted way. If someone knows a family with some needs, like a kid that needs getting ready for school or buying food for them, there are various accounts and ways to do that. So it's getting there, help is getting there. And again, we're all very grateful for all the solidarity and help, and all the friends that are watching Belarus internationally, seeing what's going on. Of course, one big surprise for all was this so-called self-inauguration of Lukashenko last week, which was responded to by, it's completely farcical, and lots of people did marches wearing like McDonald's or Burger King crowns in their heads, proclaiming themselves, the king of the whole universe, the father of dragons and what have you, mother of dragons. Basically it was a humorous response to a pretty ridiculous situation. But he is effectively now not legitimate, and today even Emmanuel Macron called upon him to step down, which was very good of him. And the only person who formally recognized him and congratulated him was the Turkmenistan head, who is another one of the dying breed of dictators, father of the Turkmen people, Turkmenbashi, as he is known. And even Putin didn't really formally congratulate him on the inauguration. I think that they're trying to wash their hands of Lukashenko because he is, as someone said, he becomes like a suitcase without a handle. You have to do something with it. You just extended him a loan, but he's not going to pay it back. All his orders are not legitimate because whoever comes next is not going to stand by them. And so that's the updates about what's going on at the moment. And I know that David asked me to say a few words about probably international solidarity and how it's organized at home and in the diaspora. Yeah. I can see nodding.
Sorry, I'm a little short of words because I was muted. Look, that's fantastic. But maybe come in again, if you could, Elena, when we are talking about what to do next, because these are the urgent items we'd like to discuss. Is that possible?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and also I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to open it to contributions for a short time before we go back to actual people presenting for us. Could you please use the raise the hand button on the participants list, and then we can see who wants to speak on it. And we are at this moment talking about how women organise basically around employment and the issues around, obviously we've had the second issue of what's happening in Belarus, political instability, and how we have to respond to that. I haven't got any hands up, I can't invite anybody to speak. Okay. I have, I'm not quite sure why some of the comrades who were going to be here from Britain are not here. Literally, I was in touch about 10 minutes before the meeting started, and they were coming at that point. So presumably, there's been an emergency of some kind they've had to deal with. So, is there anyone else who would like to contribute at this minute? Is there anyone indicating? Vivian, would you like to come in?
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
I wanted to ask Elena a question, but it might not be the right time for her to come back.
Just about
ask. Okay. Well, it's obvious that the workers in Belarus and the women in particular are very brave and very determined, and they've put up with not only their employers but the police, and they clearly want better conditions and better rights to organise, and the police shouldn't beat them up and rape them in prison and so on. Obviously that's really important, but what I wanted to know was the extent to which there was a feeling of taking it to a higher level, if you like, because you've got the Western powers, you've got the EU and other countries probably, who would like to take control of Belarus's mineral wealth and production capabilities and return those to the capitalist system. you've got Russia, who's determined to keep its influence, or perhaps it's not very keen on Lukashenko, but it doesn't want to lose control over Belarus, I don't think. So I'm just wondering about the generalization and the possibility of moving to a higher level.
Well, that might be, yeah, strictly speaking, not just the women's issues question.
No,
yeah,
absolutely not. No.
In terms of, the general feeling that, of course, everyone is ready to move it to a higher level, and the Coordination Council, various people were given interview, and as soon as they're given guarantees that they're not rearrested the minute they cross back into Belarus and put in prison for worse, they of course would want to come back. And I don't know even whether it could be called a dialogue, because no one from Lukashenko's government is at the moment ready for a dialogue or responded to any attempts of the Coordination Council of a dialogue. But certainly some of the Western powers and some people in Russia certainly are ready to discuss what might be next. In terms of mineral resources, I would say Belarus's biggest capital is its people, highly educated people. And of course, if the situation turns for the worst, a lot of those highly educated people would go elsewhere. It's easy for them to do. They would learn languages. All the neighboring countries invited them to come in and set up and will assist them. So it's going to be Lukashenko's loss, and certainly Belarus's loss, and no one wants that to happen. Many people are determined to stay back and do what they can. Plus people who had been forced to emigrate, they are ready to come back and chip in and help and build a new Belarus when the time is right, when they're not imprisoned for crossing right back. And in terms of workers' rights and rights to strike and rights to decide the conditions in the enterprises, that's the whole new big issue. I've been in touch with the strike committees lately, and one thing that needs to be really done is some delegations, possibly for Western trade unions, coming in to their Belarusian partners and checking on the workers' conditions, on the working conditions, on the ecology, on the ISO standards, because these are dire. And some basically, when the checking commission apparently comes to the factory, everything is spick and span. Obviously, no one is beaten up, and they're treated like royalty. And when they leave, then workers cannot see the building for the smog. It's thick yellow smog, or really bad pollution in some of the industrial towns. People having very high rate of cancer, illnesses, various other pollution-related illnesses. So it's not rosy at all. So it's very much a myth that Lukashenko has been such a good socialist manager, employer. It's the opposite. The workers basically are paid not even the promised $500 equivalent. A lot are paid a lot less and have to do a lot more work for the money. It's not like, plus of course their contracts sometimes are extended 6 months on, 6 months on, and if they put a foot wrong, they're just chucked out. If they strike, they're chucked out, and sometimes they could be charged and their property will be confiscated, criminal case initiated, if something goes wrong in the factory and it's down to a strike, allegedly. So they have to be very careful if they strike and shut down any production. Obviously, they want to do it safely. And another thing that they would certainly be helped with, if any Western companies would, the partners, which are currently working with the state enterprises, would actually, put in some weight, some influence to have a say about workers' conditions, corporate social responsibility, and all that, and not just send them letters saying, oh, look, you have to finish the contract no matter what. It should be, well, we'll fully support you. You have the right to voice your opinion, your right to strike, because we see what's happening at the moment, and it's not, we want to support the workers. And yes, back to the taken to a higher level. Today I've had one interview where Pavel Latushka, he used to be a high-level diplomat in Lukashenko's system. Then he sided with the people, he resigned, and during the coordination council, so now he was forced to leave the country, and he spoke from abroad. And he said now it's very much Svetlana Tikhanovskaya's big call. It's a very, very big call, because she is in a position that kind of life puts her in, and she rose to the occasion. She has to decide whether she needs to call upon people to, take her, accept her as the president-elect, and then it has to be some inauguration of her, even though it might be not in Belarus but abroad. Or she has to, another plan, it has to be some way to hold the elections with help of everyone else. And then it will be another way for protesters, another plan as well. We don't know what the plan is and how it will turn out. But at the moment, obviously, as any revolutions, lots of ups and downs, lots of hope. Oh, I know that people that are taking time away from their families, from their jobs, from everything else they have, they want to build a fairer country. And it's going to be a properly fairer country with women's rights respected, with workers' rights respected, minorities' rights respected, and basically taking the best. If they're taking something from the West, it will be the best for, respecting human rights properly. And of course, the system of law, the supremacy of law.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Jimmy Kelly, his hand raised.
Just while we have Elena handy, there's 3 questions I would like to ask, and one of them is a criticism that has often been labelled or levelled of the situation in Belarus is that the trade unions support Lukashenko. Now, this often comes from people who have loyalties or sympathies to the international communist parties. How valid is that statement, and how accurate is that statement? The second one is, with the question of the winter coming on, I understand that from October on, Belarus can be a very barren place and very difficult to work in the open. Is it possible to sustain marches and demonstrations past October and into the hard winter? And the third one then is, if weather is going to be a factor and it imposes a time limit on activity, is the issue of calling a general strike a practical one, a possible one, or a real one? Because from the opinion that I would have as an outsider is that the seizure of production by the workers is really the only way to bring this to a sudden and short end and push Lukashenko into the dustbin. So I'd leave you those 3 questions, Elena. Thank you.
Can I bring David Henson in next?
Yes, shall I reply to those 3 as quickly as I can?
Elena, can we let David come in and then bring you back to answer all of them?
Of course.
Okay, I apologize because there seems to be a bit of a zigzag in the discussion, but Elena, fantastic report, thank you. I just wanted to focus in on 2 questions really. That is, the predicaments, the struggles of shack dwellers in South Africa, and the question of domestic violence. It's associated. And in a sense, I'm hoping to try and raise some issues which I know that Nomsa Sizani, herself would want to raise. Could I mention that in the past few days, I've just learned that Nomsa actually lost her son with police violence on a raid on a shack community where, she was in a place called Marion Hill. It's an old mission and just outside of Durban. And, women who are standing up, for their rights to housing at the moment are in a terrible predicament. And, I have sent messages to her of acknowledging, what she's been through. but you know, the struggles are quite immense. Her son was not the first to have died in fighting for housing rights in South Africa. And unfortunately, I have to say that the ruling party, the African National Congress, which calls itself a liberation movement, is not above assassinating the leadership of the Abashlali, the organization of the homeless, those who are putting up shacks. Now, these people are on the right in the center of you know, some communities. Wherever there's an opportunity to get some land, as in Durban, it's in the case, it's situated right to against the municipal dump. And I visited there often, and the stench is something to, you know, to have to breathe is an effort. The municipality sprays continuously into the air to try and dampen down the stench. But, you know, imagine bringing up a child under those circumstances. And yet there's an extraordinary strength in Abashlali and these communities. They're highly organized, and they are active in pressing their case with the municipality and nationally, and have the perspective of seeing a mass civic movement, a mass movement of poor and working people in South Africa to be able to claim their rights and to be able to have a life. So I just wanted to mention that. I think what I'd like to do in the future is to do an interview with Nomsa Sazani. She's a marvelous speaker. If you consider she's not sure from day to day how she's living or where she's staying, and yet she's, you know, been able to act as a spokesperson, you know, for such a magnificent movement. A movement now lasted more than 10 years. It's going nowhere. It's knocking on the door all the time and demanding rights, the rights which were promised when the ANC came to power and have been denied every day since. So, you know, the message that we'd like to pass on to Abashlali and to those who are struggling in South Africa, particularly the informal sector, women who are on the streets that Pat has mentioned, and those who are struggling to maintain their homes, is that there's international solidarity, and we're putting their demands, their concerns on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And I'm sorry, I am aware that we're jumping around in terms of topics, but I'll take Dave Buxton next, and then I'll bring Elena back. Dave?
Okay, I want to address the first issue that was under discussion, which is women at work and trade unions. And I'm coming to the view that we have to carefully analyze the role of the, let's call it the traditional trade union federations, and whether they're fit for purpose. And I would argue that they're, in many ways, they're not, and that's why membership continues to dwindle away. And you know, they can be very bureaucratic. Any activists, many activists within some unions in Great Britain become victims of the union themselves, as I was, and it sort of creates a lot of demoralization with the activists, not only the one that's been victimized, but those around who see that the union attacks the best organizers, if you like. So I think we have to look outside of the traditional forms. I'm not dismissing them. I think that they're there. They have to be democratized. But for example, I've only found out in the last few months about the independent workers of Great Britain who are trying to organize Deliveroo couriers, for example, City Sprint couriers, and also trying to work around the issue of congestion charge and minicab workers in London, which of course there are tens of thousands of these in London. So they're trying to organize people who you could say are precarious, good examples. And the other union is called United Voices of the World. And on there, if you look on their website, they've had declare these victories at St Mary's Hospital, University of Greenwich, London School of Economics, the Daily Mail, Sotheby's, Chanel, Topshop, and it goes on and on. And at the forefront, particularly of the United Voices of the World, is putting strike action right at the forefront. And I think I've also read about, no, I watched a video of this union organizer in America, Jane McElvey, who in around 2003 in one of the states in America where the level of union organization was really, really low, they managed to organize union membership in 4 hospitals, and that was through using the power of strike action. Now, the point I want to make about strike action being at the fore, I read also that that unions in, let's say, in the latter decades have turned to this idea of social dialogue as the means of making, protecting workers and getting some change. And they got to that position not because, you know, they're ace negotiators and that's really the right way for unions to go, but because they got that on the back of massive strike waves in previous generations. So the employers were looking at ways to try and nullify the effectiveness of trade unions, and the way they did that is in a way is to say, oh, okay, we're prepared to negotiate. But as we've gone on and the number of people in unions has declined, so the power of social dialogue and negotiation has dwindled. So I think we need to analyze what's going wrong with the unions, have a really strong argument about the existing ways of organising. And I think some of the unions in Britain, for example, I know the Bakers Union have, we're trying to organise in small bakers, well, large chains, but in small bakers and other small outfits where there's a large preponderance of women workers. And the other last part I'll mention is that I think we also tie that to community struggles, because where we're losing, let's call it the social wage, which is services that the unions have often campaigned for, where we're losing that and people are struggling against a loss of services, we should be saying, not only do we fight within the workplace, but we should be organising the community as well. And a good example of that is the privatisation of schools and academies. So in the area where I am, there was a really powerful campaign which stopped schools from academizing, and there were parents, really big picket lines of parents and strikers within the schools. So I think it's a brilliant example to show the way forward, but I think we need to be more open-minded about how unions work. If they're not doing the job they should be doing, then look into other unions that could be more effective in winning rights for workers, particularly precarious and women workers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Can we now go back to, sorry, I've had a message saying, can we invite Myra to speak about uprising in Ecuador? Yes, of course we can. But can I ask Elena just to answer the question she was asked, and then we can move on to Myra? Yes. Elena, sorry, I really do apologise that this is bitty, but it's the name of the game, I think, of where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Felicity. Yes, I'll be as flexible as I can be. And yeah, try to do my bit for the team as well. Yeah, so first question from Jimmy was whether trade unions really do support Lukashenko. Well, we did have some independent trade union reps at one of our meetings a few weeks ago. And I'm still in touch with them and all the strike committees. Well, there is one. Hello. There was just one official union, pro-Lukashenko union, which is the official one, and that's the only one which supports him because they've got no other way. They haven't got any other purpose but to support and do as they're told. However, if you look at their websites, they've got maybe about 20 likes of what they post. And have a look at the independent trade union website. You can see how much is of the actual real life workers' communication in Belarus, how much they interact with their colleagues from outside Belarus, similar trade unions. They are members of global unions, and they basically want to adopt the best practices. They want to help people to leave the official trade union, which is a bit like you don't really have a choice. You join and there you stay if you want to have your job effectively. It's not really their choice, and they're trying to make it easy for people to leave and take a risk and join the independent trade union, where they will be writing the script for the actual workers union. And yeah, those guys, they certainly will be able to, happy to comment or to reply to this properly. So yes, that's a myth, because that's an official trade union, and they purposely, that official trade union, another thing I was told, that they purposely were squeezing out all the most activist workers from their jobs, from their work. Really, all they need is someone very obedient. So the second question was the bad weather coming in. Well, today wasn't the best weather in Belarus. It was driving rain, it was very strong winds, and people walked about 10 miles in that weather, you know, going around the police, going around the tear gas, water cannons, to add to the natural rain. They still did come out. And they've got their big winter coats ready. And another thing I wanted to mention, that the protest is taken, is distributed form now, because after the marches and between the marches, everyone goes to their sleeping districts, everyone goes to where they live. All the high-rise dwellers, they all get together, they have events right there outside, they have free lectures about the history, the culture of Belarus, about what's going on. They drink tea, they bond, they get some solidarity, they help each other, find out who needs help. They really like one for all and all for one. They do amazing street art, amazing creative graffiti. They do what they can. And basically, because Belarus has this history of being a partisan movement country, Second World War, this is what people are very good at, even though they might be, having very poker face, turning up for their job, and they'll be doing what they can to actually make a change. And because they know there are 97% of them in the country thinking alike, and it's only 3% that really needs to, get to move on and leave or change sides, some of them. And plus a lot of the actual police are resigning because they are just not prepared to beat people. And of course, they're getting a lot of, being ostracized by their families, their friends. People write on their doors sometimes saying so-and-so that beaten and raped so many lives here. And of course, it's not nice coming home reading that. So you'll be looking behind your shoulder all the time. But so far, people are not stooping as low as to reciprocate with violence. Although, of course, there are hotheads saying, "Oh, come on, this is much quicker than peaceful protest." So there are lots of voices with various opinions. As for the time limit on activity, well, protest might change. It might coalesce. It might consolidate. New leaders will emerge, and they are emerging. People taking charge. And yes, those who are now outside the country would have to obviously rise to the challenge. They are currently at the crossroads, what to do, which way to go, either to do government in exile or to call on a free and fair election. And in fact, the EU and the US were hoping to do a joint sanctions package together. So it still might be happening. And the position of Cyprus is not necessarily a hindrance. Yeah. And I just wanted to say one thing about the diaspora solidarity. Solidarity is happening inside the country, and lots of ways of resisting and moving the situation on are being invented, like as we speak. In the worldwide solidarity, there were a couple of big solidarity days with Belarus when Belarusians and friends of Belarus all around the world had actions, events, demonstrations. Today, I'm just trying to get the exact text. Today was the Belarus Says No action, which I successfully missed because I was on this call and another call. But in London, for example, there was a picket opposite the Belarusian embassy, saying Belarus says no to violence, no to, so just trying to find the exact text there. And no to Lukashenko, no to violence, no to dictatorship. And Saturday night, there were similar events in the States, in Europe, in the East, in Australia, Oceania. There were today in the morning. And there are various like Facebook groups by the country. They're all getting joined up globally. We're finally not just chatting between ourselves in our kitchens, but joining up, finding out who else is doing what, and it's becoming really global. And I think it's I wouldn't put a time limit on it. Some people said it's gonna sort out itself by November, but Lukashenko very clear, without telling one, decided to self-inaugurate a couple of months before. And of course, he did it in secret, even from his own supporters. No one knew. And at the last minute, when the ceremony already started, they were still saying, no, we don't know. We have no information. And then just put one picture and a short statement of him. So that was a complete farce. And in November would have been his last, when he would have been no longer legitimate president. But now he kind of sped that up. That he's no longer legitimate president or anyone to Belarusian people. And it's a question of what's next. And other people were saying that obviously with the general strike, it will be all over by Christmas, if not before. In terms of general strike, it's something that is being worked at, and more enterprises are joining. And it's not easy for them at all, because of the thing that the authorities are scared of the most. They know that it's going to just completely wipe down the economy. It's not going to be good for anyone else, but once they're gone, it will all spring back up. It will be restored. And once workers feel in control. So it's what's happening at the moment. They arrested, at least as of today, 5 activists of the strike channel called Basta. And they're trying to open a criminal case against them. And it's very scary to even think what those people are going to face. We're just trying to get more information and drum up some support. And of course, watch what's happening. But it's difficult. It's different because they were arrested one by one before and did some time one by one. But now they were all arrested in a real swoop through windows and doors. The riot police came in, they were grabbed and all put together. And now they are trying to present it as a criminal organization, trying to disrupt the production, trying to disrupt the country. So certainly it's a real hunt for activists, of strikers, any hunt for anyone who is supporting or encouraging the strikes. And people are very aware, they're very careful, and they're still carrying on with all that happening.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
I have, sorry, I'm trying to take a note. There was a comment from Janet Owen, Driver, is it the surname, about what's going on in the States. Would you like to speak for a minute on that, Janice?
Hi. Sure. I'm a teacher in a community college, and there's a lot more listening at the moment for the possibility of strike action than I've ever heard previously. I've lived in the States for the last 25 years and worked in education for the majority of that time. Many of you probably know about the very precarious situations of non-tenured faculty in American colleges, where you're working on contracts for 3-month contracts. There's no benefits, there's no right to re-employment. If your classes don't fill, you might do all the work to teach the class, but then have it cut in the first week of the semester. So it's a very, very precarious occupation. So there's been a lot of work in the last 2 or 3 years around unionizing particularly adjunct faculty who are carrying enormous bills for their education. Most of them have got PhDs, some of them are living in cars, etc. So this is a population ripe for unionization, but of course the colleges and universities and the Department of Education are fighting back. And one of their primary weapons is the history of anti-trade unionism rhetoric and propaganda, which is still incredibly heavy here in the States. But I think that one of the things that helps to counter that is the run of K-12, that's kindergarten through 12th grade schools, the run of strikes that were happening last year and the year before that were successful. And one of the one that I was involved in was the LA teachers strike, which was successful, and it was incredibly well supported by members of the public. You know, you'd be out on the picket line outside the school in the driving rain, unusually for Los Angeles. It was really kind of miserable time of year, but you'd have parents bringing their kids to the picket line, bringing, you know, baked goods and coffee, and there was massive support from the public for teachers. So that was an indication to me that there is more willingness than I have seen before in the United States, at least in my little part of it, for union activity and strike activity. And my teachers union is slowly advancing towards strike action that will probably take place unless you know, the changes we're asking for are made sometime next year.
Thank you very much, Janet. That was very useful. And as a retired teacher with many, many years in the union, you know, good luck to that. And incidentally, the 0 hours contracts are most common in Britain in catering, but the second place they're most common in is in higher education. So we've got a similar situation from developing that you've described as well. Could we now bring, sorry?
I just wanted to add that there is a difference, though, that, you know, was brought home forcibly to me when I moved from the UK to the US. Here there's no, and I'm sure you all know this, there is no cushion. So an adjunct faculty who has zero, you know, a basically equivalent of a 0 hours contract has no access to healthcare, because healthcare is provided here through your employer.
Yeah.
So it's really bad for the, you know, these highly educated, highly qualified people. Not that that makes them superior or different from any other worker. It's just that, you know, they're carrying the burden of that educational debt also that could be $250,000.
Yeah. Yeah, it's worth reminding us of that, because indeed, you know, the NHS
is so precious. Yeah.
The NHS is very precious and very, very fragile at the moment. Could I ask our comrade to tell us a little bit about the situation in Ecuador?
Yes, sure. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. It has been such a pleasure to hear. I cannot remember the person from South Africa, Elena, Dave, just listening the struggles that we suffer in every single country. We have so much similarities. In Ecuador, basically, you know, being such a fragile country where, unfortunately, possibly for me, it's very hard to say about this, but as many of you might be aware, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, are organizations of the United States who actually implement economic policies in our poor countries, therefore living in a massive poverty and desperations, giving money to corrupt government, because you know, the more you read the evidence and you reach to these conclusions. In Ecuador, we actually have a corrupt government who was stealing the resources are still stealing the resources, and yet the International Monetary Fund has given them the money. This government has the cheek to reduce to the richest people of the country of 4.6 million just on interest, and he gets from the International Monetary Fund 4.2 million. Obviously, to summarize, he got more money than that, but just for you to put into context what is actually happening, you know. And we have a big monster behind us. And it's these people who are actually leading to all the suffering, not just women's, you know, the poorest people, children, the youngsters, where they are obliged to follow these economic policies, where the governments, they have to privatize all the resources, included education, included health, all the minerals, all the oils. But first of all, what they did in Ecuador, and to me, time and time again, they do exactly the same in every single country. If you read the literature, what is happening in Africa, what is happening recently in Greece, first of all, the governments, what they do, and together with the elite of every single country, they pretend and they lie through the media, telling people that the resources that the country has, they are good for nothing. They are inefficient, and they only provide expenditure for the government, which is absolutely rubbish and absolutely liar. All of this is leaving millions of people, because I cannot say even thousands, we could say billions of people worldwide, and so much suffering. In Ecuador at the moment, we have a corrupt government, a thief government, because it's stealing everything. They have among the people in the government, they have shared all the resources in Ecuador together with the international organizations, giving the names by the International Monetary Fund, and unfortunately. We are in a struggle since last October. We've been in the streets. Last October, we have several people who were killed by this government. Thousands of people were imprisoned. Hundreds of people were damaged and somehow. Eyes were removed, legs were removed. It was absolutely atrocious. And people again are organizing again, because this government has totally dismantled the country, and we are still struggling. I am quite active with my comrades in New Ham, but at the moment I've been very active trying to defend the right in Ecuador, trying to meet with different people and organize people, writing letters to our MPs, writing here to the United Nations to defend our nation. You know, I don't know when we're going to stop the International Monetary Fund, but it's the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank that is the big issue and is the big problem. Are the guilty ones of leaving millions of people in extreme poverty together with the elites of every single country. Thank you so much for listening to me, but I think our struggles are similar with all of us. Felicit, your microphone is off.
Apologies, I'm ranting on and no one can hear me. I'm very sorry. Thank you very much, Myra. Please do keep in touch and make sure that, you know, we are told when you need things raising, when there are campaign points around Ecuador that we can help with. I think that is really, really important. And in Britain, we're seeing public services completely wrecked. And, well, not completely wrecked, but severely damaged. And we do recognise that the people who saw this happen first were countries in the global south, where the IMF and the World Bank insisted on restructuring, maybe 10 years before they did it to the West. But the damage in Britain is we're well aware that we have to take the lessons from what happened to you and how we fight back. Is there anyone else who's at this moment wants to come into this part of the discussion? I can't see any raised hands on my participants list. Leslie, did you want to come in? Yes, please, Leslie.
Yeah, just well, thank you for the contributions and solidarity to you all. Just a couple of points. First of all, here the nurses have set up their own organisation, from the sort of Nurses Say No campaign to the refusal of the pay rise. They now have an organisation called Nurse United, which is a rank and file organisation that's being paid for out of their own donations, and it's very small, but it's got a wide reach, and they've been self-organising, and now they've got the GNM and Unite in words at any rate to support 15% pay rise. RCN are saying something like 12%. Unison are saying 2,500 flat rate. Other circumstances, flat rate pay rise is not a bad thing because it raises everybody, but obviously when you've had a pay cut for 10 years, 2,500 doesn't amount to very much. And one of the things that they've been doing is they have the batch Wednesday where they all wear the 15% pay rise batch on a Wednesday and go into work and try and have a discussion with their colleagues or in the cafe or the canteen or wherever going in hospital to talk to people. And they've been going around leaflets in their own hospitals, putting up posters. So, that's an example of mainly women, and it's mainly student nurses and younger women, not exclusively, trying to self-organise and, as I said last week, knock on the door of their trade unions or kick the door in some cases. Secondly, the UCU's, the mentioned college lecturers, there's been strikes earlier this year and the end of last year over pensions, but also pay-in conditions, and many people are on short-term contracts, and many women don't get promotion. Many women are on short-term contracts, not exclusively, but there were a lot of women on the picket lines, and obviously the universities are coming using COVID as an excuse to come back for more. So I think we'll see more develop there. The MU is interesting because they've had although that's been an amalgamation of traditional teach. Sorry. Yeah.
Leslie, we can't hear you very well.
Yeah.
Leslie, we can't hear you very well.
Yeah, sorry.
Leslie, could you call me and link to the call through your phone? Because we're not hearing you. No, she's not on the video unless it's not got video. Yeah, we can hear about one word in 3, Leslie. Could you call me and I'll link you to the phone, link you to the meeting by the phone?
Okay, is that any better?
No.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I think it might be my internet connection.
I think it is your connection, yes. Could you call me? Sorry, could you stop talking now, Leslie?
Yeah, okay, I'll do that.
And can anybody else who's got their microphone that not muted, please mute themselves so we can actually get some order back in. I'm going to, I'll summarise what Leslie said.
Okay, I'll be now, Felicity.
Thank you.
Yes, I will do, yeah.
Right, okay. So if you switch off, Leslie, I will put you on the phone through to this. Okay, right. Okay, carry on, Leslie, using the phone.
I'm not talking.
No. Can't do it. Can't manage this. Stop for a minute. Sorry. Right, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for the technical problems there. What Leslie was talking about is there's been a big move in the employment in amongst the hospital workers to actually push rank and file trade unionism, demanding this, demanding a realistic pay increase, and they have really taken it into the hospitals themselves with getting people to wear badges, demanding the pay rise, and organising amongst the rank and file of the trade unions. And it's been, you know, very young nurses in the forefront of this, either people who are student nurses or those who are very recently qualified, and obviously being nurses, predominantly women in that struggle. And Leslie also mentioned the issue of the UCU strikes that have taken place and the level of organisation, and how many people have joined the unions, the teaching unions and the education unions, during the lockdown period and the struggles around the virus. Can people hear me properly? Yeah, okay, that's fine. There was a message from someone saying go to a different room, but I wish I could do, but if it wasn't aimed at me, that's fine. Right, is there anybody else who wants to come in at this point? I want to move on, certainly by 8:45 to what we do next, the next steps. Is there anyone who would like to come in at this point? David, your hand is up. Is it intentionally still up, Dave Henson?
Look, I've spoken. I'd like to come in towards the end to see how we continue, but let me not say anything more now.
Okay, thank you. Right, I want to move then to the concluding section of the meeting. I do apologise. The comrades from the domestic violence issues have sent apologies. There are urgent matters that they've had to deal with. And we will have to come back to that section at another meeting. We have had an interim meeting since the last week's meeting, where we discussed what we were going to do next on that issue, and we can share that with you at either at another point, I think. And obviously the issue of housing, which is crucial, has not yet been discussed, but I think the whole housing issue is something that we could devote a whole meeting to, especially with the issue in Britain of evictions and the situation in the States with the mass unemployment leading possibly to yet another round of evictions there. And what we have described from the shack dwellers and the issues around housing in many other countries. So can I now move on? And I want to ask people to talk about how do we pull this together? You know, I think using Zoom format, but other formats as well to develop the links technically, and what the purposes of the links would be. So can I ask for contributions on that point, including from David if he wants to come in at this point, but from the women comrades especially. in which case I'm going to come up with the proposals that we've discussed and think we might maybe could do. One is to set up perhaps a discussion, either an email group or a WhatsApp group amongst the women involved in this in these seminars, to see how we can link our work. I think that the point about solidarity is to give strength individually and collectively to the people involved in struggle. And that's itself a very important point, but also international solidarity on a very simple level and on as sophisticated a level as we can directly affects the people who are oppressing us. They affect the governments, they affect the trade unions who might not be listening to us or might be directly involved in our oppression. So using solidarity is massively important. I'm suggesting that we set up a website, a very simple website, simply to carry reports of women's struggles in different parts of the world, so that we can have videos from the different parts, from Zera, from the shack dwellers, from what's going on in Zimbabwe, from Belarus, from all the different struggles that we are aware of, so that we can see if that works. It might work, it might not work, but can I see if comrades think that they are useful ways forward? Pam, what do you think? I'm throwing it at people now. Pam?
Sorry, you've caught me on the hop then. Ways in which we can pull things together. I think we need an easy way of communication. I'm not a great fan of WhatsApp myself because it tends to come at you all the time. I'm wondering if there's some other method we could use.
Yeah. Well, anyone else? Okay.
Maybe sorry, if I could, excuse me, cutting in. I mean, I'd really, I'd love to hear what Maddie might think. But anyway, let me offer, some ideas. I've had the privilege of some exchange with Elena, who's got the most marvelous network of links into Belarus. And at times there are 5 women who are prepared to speak and who are available to speak. Excuse our visitor in the background, you might hear a dog. And at other times, maybe 10 or even 15. Now, each of them would like to at least have their 10 minutes, but and maybe more. So it's a challenge. So what I do think is what we could do, and of course there's a language issue because we really, we are kind of English speaking. But I do think if we could lay up a store of interviews with people, I would love to hear more from Nomsa and other people who are right there in the front line in Ecuador. Myra's done some marvelous interventions, more from Zera, so that we hear her clearly to know exactly what's going on. I see that she's on Facebook, live streaming, quite often each week. So we, Tia, who is not present this time, I'm sorry to say, but look, we, maybe an interview with her. In other words, to gather together, material which could be on a simple website or a Facebook page, certainly a Facebook page. People do seem to be familiar with that. In other words, let's bring together, clear, well-spoken, very interesting, but not too long presentations. And then I know we'll be listening to them and we want to take it further. Let me just leave it at that and say that, let's also schedule a talk, another convening of a discussion, maybe in a month's time, to see where we are. In between, there's the work in Belarus. There's the work that we'd like to see in relation to you know, the women who are imprisoned, detained in Zimbabwe. Anyway, there's so many things which are coming up, but we want to continue our strong streams, like the work, a marvelous work, which I'd like to thank the comrades for in relation to Belarus. It's having some effect, and then let's see how we can bring it all together and then discuss again, maybe in a month's time.
Your Michael from Felicita.
Felicity, turn your mic on.
Felicity,
Felicity, turn your mic on.
Turn your mic
off
on.
and turned it on, yeah. Right, sorry, comrades. So is there any other contributions from anybody on these issues?
Are we thinking we should meet to discuss this more often? Because obviously we have lots of different subjects at the Sunday night meeting. Do you think we need a separate group to follow this theme along, anybody? I mean, the traditional thing is a women's group, which I'm not particularly mad on, but that's a possibility, I suppose.
I think it's essential.
Yeah.
If we're going to get anywhere, I think we really do need to have, you know, one that's devoted to the issues around women. You know, we're aware that women are a majority of trade unionists in the UK, but it doesn't mean that there aren't separate issues that women need to discuss.
Well, that's what we should do then, yeah.
David?
Yeah, I just want to comment on the ideas. I agree with Pam that WhatsApp, I just find it very annoying, the amount of messages. You tend to get a lot of small little bitty bits of comment, and then people don't seem to make appropriate remarks on these groups. And the Facebook page, you can have the membership private, but many people use that. You can put lengthier articles on there, or you can put links to it, or you can have videos of actions that are ongoing, and you can then forward that via Facebook to many other Facebook users. So I think Facebook have sort of restricted sharing to large numbers of people. I think there's probably ways around it, and I agree that I was shocked by last week's meeting where I think it was Amy said 4 women were killed in 1 week in that area. I was absolutely shocked, and we need to be doing something. We need to at least publicize that this is going on, these sorts of things, and then it's even worse in other countries, as we've heard from Pakistan, for example. And we need, I agree, we have to have a specific presence about women in struggle, and then promote that. So I agree with the general ideas that we need to find other forms of publicizing these issues.
Thank you. Right. Okay, comrades. So can I have then sort of permission from the group here? Wynne has a small amount of money in a bank account that I have, that we can pay £80 to set up a website on women's struggles. We'll dream up I'll talk to Jabu about getting a good name for it, and we'll get a WordPress thing set up this week, if that's acceptable to people. Can we have a general yes or no to that?
Yeah.
Okay, right, thank you. So that will be point 1. David, can you make sure you try and get us an interview from your comrades in South Africa and in Zimbabwe, so we've got definite interview things, and I will take responsibility for trying to get one with Zira. Can our comrades from Ecuador try and make sure that we get something? And Elena, I'm certain you will produce us some excellent work from Belarus to really, make sure. And then it's pointless having those things on the website unless you individually take responsibility to share it as widely as you possibly can, so that we get, and strategically, not just a sort of broadcast one, but sharing it where it might actually you know, strike a chord with people and help their struggle as well. And we'll make sure that we'll get an interview with the Nurses United as well for it. So we've got very definite things to do. Can I ask whether people would prefer it to be a WhatsApp or a discussion, you know, an email discussion list? If you think WhatsApp, can you stick your hand up and I can see? If you think an email list is better, can you put your hand up for that? Okay, generally it seems to be an email list. Thank you very much. So we've got a lot to do. David, I'm going to be reliant on you for emails to get the email list set up. And if you haven't sent an email to David, please send one. So he's got that. Pam?
Just to say, Felicity, if you want me to help you with some stuff, I'd quite happy to work along with you to get this created, yeah. So
yes, please.
I think it's brilliant. So we've got to set a meeting up as well, aren't we now? So
yeah.
Okay.
I think that will be really, really good. Thank you very much indeed. And Trish, I'm going to call on you as well for some help. We need all the help we can get. Right. Thank you. Right, comrades, we're coming towards the end of the meeting. Roger, did you want to say anything in this last couple of minutes?
Just, we are working on on a meeting next week. Just please, just watch your inboxes and you'll get information. I just want to say also how exhilarated I am by how well this work is going.
Well, thank you very much to everyone. Is there anyone here who wants to say something that anyone else needs to know? Any struggle you want to share in the last couple of minutes that we've got? Sorry, comment. I don't know the name, but please speak. You're Mac on this.
I think that's ready.
Right.
Yeah.
You can hear me. I've been following this debate very closely, very, very interesting discussions. And I've got, thanks to Elena, a much better idea of what's happening in Belarus. But there's one thing that someone suggested this evening that I do object to, and that is that we have a women's only section. If it's a section, okay, but if it's an organization as such, then I'm very much against it. I was very much involved in the women's movement in the 1970s in South Africa, in London, and to some extent later on in Sweden. And my experience is that we have limited powers to get across in a women's only organization. In this particular setup this evening, we have fabulous men who have similar ideas, and therefore I think it's unnecessary in this context, particularly, to have a women's only organization. Thank you for listening to my views.
We're not about to lock anybody out. If people who want to help can help, but I think we're talking about something that very much focuses on the issues of women, and that can't be done without that focus.
Oh, absolutely, I agree with that. But there are a lot of men who do support the progress and the struggle of women.
Sadly, many that don't. But right. Thank you very much. Oh, Pam, you wanted to say something. Go on.
Yes,
you're saying goodbye.
No, I'm not saying goodbye. I just wanted to say, I mean, no discredit to the men who are all fantastic, but I have noticed there's a tendency to be a lot more the men than women involved in this sort of thing. So, I mean, I'm not a great fan of women's organisations anyway, like Mac. Well, sorry, I know you're not called Mac. I can't remember what your name is. But I think actually it could be quite useful, really, because we definitely are a bit thin on the ground at times, I think. I don't know where everybody else thinks that. Yeah.
Well, we have had, you know, in Spain, the year before last, we had a women's strike that went into millions of people, and the men did the jobs that women do at home unpaid on the day of that strike. There was a role for the men in that position, but we can't, unless the women themselves are organized. You know, the classic is the rising of the women is the rising of the class. And if you go right back to the foundation of trade unions, the unskilled trade unions in this country, the people who started that were the women in the match factories, and the person who still, the GMB still have a commemorative sort of competition each year for Eleanor Marx, who founded the GMB. So let's, you know, unless we organise the women, the class will not rise. And you know, we haven't really gone into why we're here in that sense, but we are for the fundamental transformation of society, for the ending of capitalism and for the ending of patriarchy. And doing that requires the mass mobilization of women. Now, we're not going to mobilize en masse by having a simple website and a simple discussion group, but we'll certainly help along the way in doing that and make sure that our efforts aren't dissipated and that we do pull more people in together. So thank you very much, comrades. I think I'm going to leave it at that point. It's been a very interesting meeting, and thank you to Elena, especially to our comrades from Ecuador, from the comrades and from Jabu, and to all the people who've made such a good contribution to this meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sono i confini, rosse bandiere, o proletari alla riscossa, bandiera rossa trionferà.